This episode is presented to you in the form of an audiobook. Every problem you face in life has one simple cause. You care too much about what others think of you. This concern for others' opinions is the root of your unhappiness. Today, we're diving into the book, The Courage to be Disliked, co-written by Japanese philosopher and psychologist Ichiro Kishimi and author Fumitake Koga. For both, internal worry is always linked to the outside world. They explain that there is no such thing as worry that is completely defined by the individual. So-called internal worry does not exist. Whatever the worry that may arise, the shadows of other people are always present. Kishimi and Koga argue that all of life's problems can be easily solved, and that life only seems complex because we make it so. According to them, the only thing you need to find happiness is the courage to be disliked. They explain that one must not fear being disliked. Freedom is being disliked by others. It's not that you lack confidence, you simply lack courage. They also explain that the courage to be happy also includes the courage to be disliked. When you have gained that courage, your interpersonal relationships will all at once change into things of lightness. In this episode, we'll explore the key teachings from the book, including the psychology of unhappiness, why seeking external approval is a dead end, and the author's advice on how to live a truly happy life. Kishimi and Koga's worldview is based on the belief that everyone, no matter their past, has the potential to be happy. The main difference between happy and unhappy people is their willingness to change. The book draws on the theories of psychologist Alfred Adler. Adler believed that the self is a unified whole. Our body, mind, emotions, and both conscious and unconscious thoughts all work together toward a common goal. According to Adler, everything we think, do, or feel is directed toward achieving that goal, even if we're not fully aware of it. In Adler's view, goals don't just affect our happiness, they shape who we are. This perspective suggests that the goals we set drive our sense of self. Kishimi and Koga expand on this. They explain that Adler doesn't focus on fixed personality traits, but looks at people through the lens of their lifestyle. For Adler, your habits, emotions, and thoughts make up a lifestyle you chose at some point and continue to choose because you believe it's the best way to reach a goal. For example, Kishimi and Koga would argue that there's no such thing as a truly antisocial person. Instead, they see antisocial behavior as a choice, a way of pursuing certain goals. Kishimi and Koga take this idea further by suggesting that the goals we set not only influence our actions, but also shape our emotions. First, you decide what you want, and then you create the emotions that will help you achieve it. For example, imagine someone wants a job but becomes so anxious about the interview that they can't prepare or even attend. They think that if their anxiety went away, they'd have a better chance at getting the job. However, Kishimi and Koga would argue that the person's true goal is to avoid the interview, so they create the emotion of fear. The person doesn't really want the job. Their true goal is simply to avoid the risk of failing the interview, and fear helps them do that. Kishimi and Koga also address the argument that past trauma can stop people from finding happiness. They counter by saying that not everyone who experiences trauma is stuck in it. For example, while negative childhood experiences may influence your goals, they would argue that it's still up to you to decide what goals to pursue and how to live to achieve them. In the book, they write that no experience is in itself a cause of our success or failure. We do not suffer from the shock of our experiences, the so-called trauma, but instead, we make out of them whatever suits our purposes. We are not determined by our experiences, but the meaning we give them is self-determining. They also explain that no matter what has occurred in your life up to this point, it should have no bearing at all on how you live from now on, that you, living in the here and now, are the one who determines your own life. So if happiness is within our control, why would anyone choose unhappiness? Kishimi and Koga argue that unhappiness is actually a strategy some people use to reach their goals. As we've explained, the authors believe that the goals we set influence our emotions. They argue that occasional unhappiness is normal because everyone feels disappointed or frustrated at times. However, those who are always unhappy are often driven by one constant frustrating goal, and this frustrating goal is related to their relationships with others. This is an important point because Kishimi and Koga suggest that your overall happiness depends on the goals you set for your relationships. In other words, what are you trying to achieve in your connections with others? The answer to that question shapes how happy you are. Kishimi and Koga explain that there are two main goals when interacting with others: seeking their approval or aiming to make a positive impact in their lives. Kishimi and Koga argue that unhappy people often make gaining approval from others their main goal. Unhappy people believe that true happiness comes from being seen as good by others. Whether this approval comes from a teacher, parent, or society, it always leads to the same result: unhappiness. Essentially, unhappy people believe that being liked by others makes them a good person. Many would argue that the desire for approval and seeking validation is a natural part of being human. However, Kishimi and Koga explain that this is a mistaken view. They explain that humans don't seek approval to find happiness. We find happiness in approval because it satisfies a deeper need within us. So why is it that people seek recognition from others? For Kishimi and Koga, in many cases, it is due to the influence of reward and punishment education. Kishimi and Koga point out that even when unhappy people manage to gain the approval of others, it comes with a heavy price. In their pursuit of validation, they end up living according to someone else's expectations. In doing so, they end up sacrificing their freedom and ultimately their happiness in the process. They explain, to live one's life trying to gauge other people's feelings and being worried about how they look at you, to live in such a way that others' wishes are granted. There may indeed be signposts to guide you this way, but it is a very unfree way to live. Now, why are you choosing such an unfree way to live? You are using the term desire for recognition, but what you are really saying is that you don't want to be disliked by anyone. Unless one is unconcerned by other people's judgments, has no fear of being disliked by others, and pays the cost that one might never be recognized, one will never be able to follow through in one's own way of living. That is to say, one will not be able to be free. Being praised essentially means that one is receiving judgment from another person as good, and the measure of what is good or bad about that act is that person's yardstick. If receiving praise is what one is after, one will have no choice but to adapt to that person's yardstick and put the brakes on one's own freedom. The key takeaway from this book is that no matter what you do, it's inevitable that some people won't like you. Therefore, the only way to find lasting happiness is to accept this reality and have the courage to live a life you believe is good, regardless of other people's opinions. This is why it's crucial to let go of the need for approval and develop the courage to be disliked.